last video, you saw that human language is one of many animal communication systems. The next thing we need to ask is if there's anything special that sets language apart from these other systems. In this video, we'll look at 4 basic features of human language. The 4 features are called arbitrariness, discreteness, displacement, and productivity. We'll also see that humans are biologically specialized to use language. The first feature is called arbitrariness. You saw in the last video that the basic function of language is to connect sounds and meanings. For example, anyone who speaks English knows that the sequence of sounds that we pronounce as tree refers to items like this. One thing you should notice is that there's no intrinsic connection between the way a word sounds and the item that the word refers to. The word tree doesn't actually sound like a tree. The connection between sound and meaning is random or arbitrary. We can see the arbitrariness of the pronunciation of words very clearly if we compare the word for the same thing across different languages. The words are totally different, which clearly shows that there's no intrinsic connection between the sound of the word and the thing that it refers to. There are some exceptions to arbitrariness. The opposite of arbitrariness is called iconicity. A signal is arbitrary if it does not inherently resemble its meaning, like the word tree. A signal is iconic if it does inherently resemble its meaning. An example of an iconic signal is the word for the sound that a rooster makes. In English, the word is cock-a-doodle-doo. And this word is not totally arbitrary. It does sound somewhat like the crowing of a rooster. Even here, though, there's still an element of arbitrariness. Because if we look across languages, we see that the word does vary. In each language, the word sounds something like the actual sound, so it's iconic in that sense, but the exact pronunciation of the word is still a random property of each language, so the signal is still partially arbitrary. The second feature of language is called discreteness. Like any communication system, language involves sending and receiving signals. Let's compare 2 different signals that both express the same meaning: be quiet and shh. These 2 signals express the same idea, but their properties are different. The signal be quiet is perceived as a string of separate units. There's a word be, followed by another word quiet. The signal shh, on the other hand, can't be divided up into parts. It's just a sound that you make. Another difference is that with the signal be quiet, you can take the units and recombine them to express different meanings. You can add another word to say be very quiet, or you can add a suffix to say be quieter. You can't do this with the signal shh. The only way you can change its meaning is just to say it louder or longer. Be quiet is a discrete signal. It's composed of separate parts. Shh is a non-discrete signal. It doesn't have any structure. It's just a sound that you make. Human language uses discrete signals. Most other animal communication systems use non-discrete signals like meowing, growling, or barking. This is a feature that makes language more sophisticated than most other animal communication systems. The third feature of language is called displacement. The idea here is that our use of language is not limited to the immediate situation that we find ourselves in. We can use language to talk about things that are not physically present. Take a sentence like, watch out for the tree. We don't have to be looking at an actual tree in order for me to say this sentence. For example, I could say it if I was giving you instructions about a trail that you were planning to ride next week. We can also use language to talk about things that don't exist at all, such as my future children. And we can use language to say things that are simply not true, such as my dog ate my homework. Most animal communication systems don't show this much flexibility. For example, if you think about when a cat hisses, it's normally when a threat is immediately present, not because they're imagining the hypothetical possibility of a threat in the future. There are some examples of spatial displacement. For example, honeybees can communicate the location of flower patches that are not immediately present. But language seems to be uniquely powerful in that we can communicate not only about other locations, but also about other times, as well as things that are non-existent or even untrue. The fourth feature of language is called productivity. We can describe the use of language as being productive, creative, or infinite. To see what this means, let's think about some differences between words and sentences. As a speaker of a language, you've memorized a set of words. It's a big set, but it is finite, probably somewhere around 20,000 words. And if a particular word is not in the set of words that you've memorized, then you're not going to know what that word means. For example, if I ask you, what's a blick? If that's not a word that you've already learned, then it's meaningless to you. What's interesting, though, is that we can take words from this finite set and combine them to form an infinite number of sentences. There's no limit on the number of different sentences you can produce and understand. If you take any sentence at all, you can always make a new sentence from it by adding "I know that" or "she said that" at the beginning. There's an interesting difference here. If we haven't heard a word before, we're not going to understand it. But we have no trouble at all understanding sentences that we've never heard before. As an example, here's a sentence that you've probably never heard before. Pink elephants in tutus and bow ties dance merrily. Despite never having heard it, you know exactly what this sentence means. Something like this. This is what's called productivity, and it's really the main reason why language is such a powerful system. We memorize the sounds of our language and the words of our language, but we don't memorize sentences. Instead, what you learn when you learn a language is a system that you can use to produce and to understand an infinite number of sentences. The technical term for a new sentence that you've never heard before is a novel utterance. And in fact, most of the sentences that you produce and perceive in your daily life are novel utterances. The combination of the last two features of language, discreteness and productivity, is known as discrete infinity. This is the idea that a language consists of a set of discrete signals, words, that can be combined to express an infinite number of meanings, which can involve basically anything we can imagine. This is a quote from Noam Chomsky, one of the leading voices in the field of linguistics. Language is, at its core, a system that is both digital, in other words discrete, and infinite. To my knowledge, there is no other biological system with these properties. One final point involves the relationship between language and the human body. As a member of a human culture, there are lots of activities that you learn to perform, such as dancing, playing music, braiding your hair, or even just tying your shoes. Since different cultures use different languages, you might think that language is just another thing to add to this list. It's an activity that you learn as a member of a particular culture. There's some truth to that, but it's not the whole story on language. Language is not just a cultural activity. It's a basic property of the human species. Unlike playing a musical instrument or braiding your hair, using language is completely universal. It's something that all humans do. In fact, the human body is built to use language. Now, we don't have any dedicated language organs. The organs that you use to produce language, such as your tongue and your lungs, are also used for breathing or eating. But even though breathing and eating are the primary functions of these organs, the structures and the neural pathways that control them have become highly specialized for use in language. You have way more control over the precise movement of your tongue than you would ever need for eating. The control is there for language. We can also see this by comparing the human vocal anatomy with that of other primates, such as baboons. Let's focus in particular on the position of the larynx, which is your Adam's apple. What you can see here is that the larynx of a baboon is fairly close to the roof of the mouth, whereas the larynx of a human is much lower in the throat. The reason for this difference is language. The lowering of the larynx in humans gives us more space to move our tongue around, and that's essential for language. So the lowered larynx is actually a physical adaptation that developed in humans to support the use of language. There's a side effect of the lowered larynx, though. Its position farther down in the throat makes it much easier for us to choke on food. But apparently, from an evolutionary perspective, the trade-off was worth it. The benefits that a species gains from having a powerful communication system like language outweigh the drawbacks that arise from being more susceptible to choking. This is the end of Part B of Lecture 1. The basic question in this video was, what kind of communication system is language? You should now understand the concepts of arbitrariness, discreteness, displacement, and productivity, as well as the terms novel utterance and discrete infinity, and the biological specialization of humans for the use of language.